What is going on, gunfighters? Got a request from a patron, and it's a good one. It's a good idea. So I'm going to put it out to the patrons first, and then I'll put it out to the general public. Patrons get a lot of Patreon-only content where only they get it, but I think this will benefit the larger audience. So although Patreon will get it first, you guys will get it eventually. For those that don't have a really extensive firearm background, like you're getting into shooting, you go to the range, but what are you doing? Are you making the most of your time at the range? Are you being effective in actual training, if that's your goal? I guess we'll talk about that more, because there are different goals when it comes to going to the range. But if your goal is to be more effective, how does one do that? How does one take on that obstacle? How does one clear that hurdle? That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. So saddle up for Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics. Today, range training, the right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am going to put in the bio, because if you're going to listen to me, it's one thing if I'm talking about like ballistics. You can go double-check the math for yourself. But if I'm giving you advice on how to train, you should consider, who is this guy, and should I listen to him? That's something you should ask about anybody you listen to. It's one of the reasons I started the podcast. There is a ton of gun content out there on what I would call like guntertainment, just guys just shooting random cool guns and blowing stuff up or whatever, and that's fine if that's what you want, but from somebody with real-world first-hand experience. Because of that, I'm going to throw in a bio, because you should ask, why should I listen to this guy about how to train? Then we'll get into the main topic. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as a instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years. Also NRA certified and some other 3-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast, and elk and bear and wolf, and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Enough about me, guys. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Let's get into today's topic. How does one be effective with one's range time? A couple of assumptions here. One is that you know more than nothing about guns. If you are just getting started out, pay somebody to teach you. Even if it's just going to a local range, and usually they'll have instructors, and paying for an hour of their time to go get you through some very basics. And not everything that everybody teaches is great, but even if you're decades in with experience, you can always learn something new if you come with an open mind, and you can take what you like and leave out what you don't. But especially if you're starting out, go pay somebody, even if what you can afford is an hour of instruction at a basic range. Most places there'll be some kind of range where you can hire a range coach for an hour. But assuming you've done that, assuming you have good, solid, let's say, fundamentals, stance, grip, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, breath control, follow through. Assuming you have all that decent, and assuming you're going to the range to get better. I mentioned in the preamble, there are many reasons to go to the range. One can go to the range just to plink and have fun. And there's a time for that, right? There's a time for you and your buddy to go out and just shoot cans. Make sure you pick them up when you're done, but just to have fun. To shoot firearms in a safe manner just for the enjoyment of shooting. You could be introducing a new shooter, a child, to shooting, and perhaps the metric you should use for that is whether they enjoy it and are safe, not whether they're getting better, right? But assuming your goal is to actually be effective, that's what, again, starting with a couple of assumptions there. You can be safe, you kind of know what you're doing with the fundamentals, and that's a journey, not a box to check, right? You're never just perfect at the fundamentals. That doesn't work that way, myself included. Assuming you have a decent grasp of the fundamentals and your goal is to get better, where does one start? Well, in order for this, one must have a good starting point, right? How do you measure improvement? You cannot know if you're improving if you don't have a baseline. So I would say the next time you go out to the range, you should have a couple of baselines. You should have a baseline accuracy standard for a handgun, for a rifle. What is accurate to you? How do you tell if you're improving? The goal that I set for, and this is not my goal, but this is not about me. The goal that I set for the Armed Citizen course of fire was 5 in a row on a paper plate at 25 yards, standing offhand, unsupported. That doesn't mean you have to start there. Let's say that you, right now, it's everything you have, getting your baseline to get all 5 shots on that paper plate at 7 yards. Okay, that's your baseline. That's what I'm talking about. What is your baseline? Like, what can you do now? Because how does one measure improvement if one does not have a metric? It would be like one trying to go out and... You get what I'm saying there. If you're trying to get a faster draw, then you have to know how fast your draw is. If you're right now at 2 seconds to draw and get a good shot in the PNZ, the primary neutralization zone of a target, in 2 seconds, if that's you're consistently right around 2 seconds, right? You have to know that. There are some days where I feel like I'm going slow and my times are really fast. There are some times where it feels like I'm going really fast and my times don't show it. They're not very good. The perception of time, especially in fractions of a second, is not great. So you need to have a metric for that. If that's one of the things you're trying to measure, if you're serious about shooting, you should have a shot timer. You should spend the money and get a shot timer. But if you're not there yet, just get the shot timer on your phone and download it, and try not to break your phone when you're out of the range, because that's going to cost you probably more than a shot timer. But again, you get the idea. So the next time you go out to the range, you should set up a standard for yourself. Again, what is that for you? Again, a paper plate is a good, easy thing for a handgun because it's about the size of a decent, acceptable zone center of chest. You may decide you want to use an index card. That's another real easy thing that I keep in my range bag, index cards. There are certain courses of fire that I'll run on an index card. What is your standard? Again, we stick with handgun. What is my standard for accuracy? What is my standard for the draw? If you have those already and you're a little bit farther down the line, you may want to consider running a qual. I recommend the FBI qual if it's a handgun. Not because it's the best qual out there, because it's very common, it's very ubiquitous. It's not a hard qual to pass, but your goal shouldn't be passing. Your goal should be to shoot the FBI qual and see how you do, and then keep that as a record. And this will help you gauge what you should work on. And I'm not saying that's the best metric for being effective. The FBI qual certainly is there, and it exists, and it's well, I guess ubiquitous is the best word. I came up with the Armed Citizens course of fire for you guys. It's open source. You can look that up. If you're a patron, you have free printouts and scorecards and everything. I consider that a really good course of fire for an armed citizen if that's your goal. But shoot it the first time, even if you don't pass, at least now you have kind of a standard and figure out what you have to work on. Because again, you can't gauge improvement if you don't know where you're starting from. Similar thing for the rifle. Now you can use the U.S. Army's 25 meter alternate qual if you want to do that. You can use that same target and go with the Modern Rifleman's Course of Fire that I came up with. Again, open source. Perhaps I'm not the best at marketing and money stuff, but I'm giving that out for free because I think it's important. If your goal is rifle, then shoot that and see how you do. And then you might, at least you'll have a baseline. And that's that range session. I bet you know what I'm going to tell you if you listen for any length of time. Pray and dry fire. Go back. Take some time, relax after that day at the range, and then think about it. Look back at what you did, what you need to improve on. Have a training plan, right? When I go to the gym, I'm not just like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to do today. Now, I might wonder, like, exactly what machine or whatever. I'm not one of the ones that sticks to a rigid workout plan, but I roughly know if it's time to do chest or do back or do legs or it's cardio, running, rucking time. You get the idea. Have a plan. Have a plan and dry fire. And I'm going to say, I don't care where you're at. The bulk of your training, unless you're specifically that day training for something else, the bulk of your training in general should be the fundamentals. Again, that's not a check the box. You're never there. You're always working to be better. And it's a perishable thing. The fact that you were good once, the fact that you were really good with a rifle 20 years ago, that's a perishable skill. The fact that you were good with a handgun at one time, it's a perishable skill. It'd be cool if it wasn't. It'd be cool if you could just shoot to a standard and you could always do that without ever practicing. It'd be cool if I could run really fast, ace the Army APFT, and then I never had to run again because every time I ran, I was at that standard. But that's not how it works. It's a perishable skill. You're never there. I just want to emphasize that. But pray. If you want to get better at anything, you should start with prayer. And dry fire. Dry fire is absolutely, I think, more important than live fire. So let's say that your time at the range and money at the range and stuff is limited, which unless you live on a range and you have somebody else buying your ammo, it probably is, right? Let's say a range session. Let's say you can get to the range once a week for 2 hours. Once a week for 2 hours, that's 120 minutes. And that's all that you do. You never dry fire. That's better than nothing, but you'd be better off skipping the live fire for a couple of weeks and doing 10 minutes of dry fire every day. I really honestly think that is going to make you better. Once your guns are sighted in, again, there's different reasons to go to the range, but if you're going to gauge your improvement, your gun should already be sighted in. Like your rifle should be sighted in, your handgun should be sighted in. But I absolutely believe that you're going to get more benefit out of shorter dry fire sessions than long live fire sessions less frequently. The way that I gauge my live fire is there to confirm that my dry fire is working. I say again, I use my live fire to show that my dry fire is improving my overall skill. The vast majority of things, there are a few things that you need live fire for. To confirm a gun is zero, to confirm your gun's working properly, to confirm that you have decent recoil control, because that's one thing that you really can't do in dry fire. But the vast majority, all the fundamentals, you can usually get better at dry fire than live fire because you're not distracted by the gun going off. Your sight alignment, your sight picture, your trigger control, your front sight focus, your slow, steady press of the trigger, all that stuff. The draw, the ironing out all those superfluous movements in your draw to make a smoother, faster draw, all that can be done dry fire. Can probably be done, except for Sabbath, in which I rest, but 6 days a week, every single day for a few minutes. And that's going to be better than waiting for a week or two and going to the range. So have your metric and then dry fire. Are you into shooting to just have fun? There's nothing wrong with that. But realize that's what you're doing if you're only going to the range once or twice a year and just throwing rounds down range. You're having fun turning money into noise, and there's nothing wrong with that. But don't consider yourself a gunfighter. You're actually trying to get better, which I think this person is, and hopefully many of you guys out there are. Have a regiment. Have a thing that you're working on. And the next time you go out to the range to live fire, let's say it's a week or two later, have those standards again and shoot it again. If you're shooting the FBI qual, shoot it again. If your standard was 7 yards to get all those hits on the paper plate, then do that, and hopefully you check that box and then move it back and see to what distance you can consistently get all your hits on that plate. Maybe it's 10 yards, maybe it's 12 yards. That's your new standard. You will have times where you regress. You will have times when you go out and you have a horrible range session. That's okay. As far as long-term linear going down the road, it should show improvement. And then you might find after that next range session that there are things that you need to work on. You need to readjust your training. You may figure out that right now you need to work on one-handed shooting because on the FBI qual, the one-handed shooting is what's burying you. It may be that for whatever reason you're kneeling. You're really bad at kneeling, most likely because you haven't been practicing it. So you need to practice your kneeling, and that week in dry fire. Again, the bulk of your training should always be the fundamentals, but once you've done a bulk of your training in the fundamentals, move on to, okay, this week I'm going to focus hard on kneeling. Some other things here. I'm a big fan of dry fire, even though it's not the most fun thing ever. It can be very meditative, very centering, very helpful. And I don't mean that in some garbage New Age philosophy kind of way. I mean clearing your mind of things and having a focus on a task that bridges the mental and physical and requires such a degree of focus that it kind of drowns out all the other distractions in life. If you ask me if I really look forward to dry firing every day, no. If you ask me if I really like going to the gym every day, the answer is no. If you ask me if I like running, the answer is no, but I do those things because they're beneficial. Again, so if you're in it to just shoot cool guns and make noise, that's fine, but that's not what this episode is about. There's even a time for that. If you just want to go one day to a range, find yourself in Vegas and you want to go to one of those machine gun ranges and just drop a couple of belts of ammo into an old taxi, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but don't think that you're making yourself better by doing that. That's entertainment. That's not training. We're talking about training. Another big tool for training is the 22. Again, unless somebody else is buying all your ammo, train with the 22. Many of those similar skills. Right? If you're working on the draw, that gun should pay for itself over time if you're serious about training. But let's say you have a gun and a holster setup that's very similar to your go-to carry gun or your go-to duty gun, whatever you're training for, right? Tailor it to you. But if you're working on the draw, you can go get a lot more reps in at the range with a brick of 22 500 rounds for, I'm not going to say whatever it is with inflation, but you can likely get hundreds of rounds, if we're talking about a handgun, with the 22 that you can get 50 rounds for in a 9mm. And again, there's a time and a place to train with your actual gun, and we've already discussed that. But if your goal is not multiple shots in a row recoil control, your goal is just how fast can I safely draw and get a hit in the center mass of that target, you might as well train that with the 22. If you're talking about the modern rifleman's course of fire, you should shoot it with the gun that you plan on defending your life with, your truck gun or whatever. But then after that, if you know what you need to work on, like you need to work on your moving from standing to prone, then do that with the 22. Right? Why wouldn't you? That's a good place to be with trying to grow as a shooter, and I applaud you if you are doing that. Some next logical steps you might want to do is go to a shooting competition. There are some that are much easier to understand and get into than others. I would recommend at first that if you shoot a Glock, my condolences, no, just kidding, but go shoot a GSSF match. Glock Shooting Sports Foundation, they have some of the most user-friendly, beginner-friendly shooting competitions that you can go to. You basically need your Glock with a couple of magazines in the Glock box that it came in. And it's a really good way to get into shooting. Now, you have to have a Glock, so it's for Glock shooters, but look up a GSSF match. They do a really good job at making it a low barrier to entry. Another one you may want to look up is Steel Challenge. It's pretty user-friendly, and it's one of my favorites. It's one of the most fun as well, but it also happens to be user-friendly. And I consider it to be one of the most realistic for concealed carry, even more than IDPA, which prides itself on trying to be realistic. But in my opinion, they put a bunch of rules in, and in my experience, in actual real-world scenarios, there aren't any rules, so they kind of defeat the purpose. Steel challenge is kind of drag racing with a pistol. You stand there, buzzer goes off, and you shoot several targets as fast as you can, and it's over. It's quick, it's dirty, it's fast. It's like drag racing with a handgun, which is akin to a lot of defensive shooting scenarios, and there are not a lot of rules as long as you're safe. And it's also not only one of the most fun, but it's also one of the easiest ones to get into. You shouldn't be as prone to breaking the 180 or loading your magazine the wrong way with too many rounds or whatever. A lot of that stuff doesn't matter. And they have 22 divisions for Steel Challenge, so you might want to look those up. Or you might want to look at a more traditional discipline if you're interested in more precision rifle type stuff, the 3-position. It used to be 4-position, but they took one out. You might look at small bore. They have that kind of stuff in your area. But that will show you how you shoot under stress, for one, which can be a game changer, and what you need to work on, because pitting yourself against other men is a good way to sharpen your skills and hone your skills. Another way, go take a course, not just like paying for an hour of instruction, which you can still go back and do that. You can still train a little bit and then go back and to the same person and say, how am I doing? What should I work on? And he might say, oh, you're doing good, but your grip's a little funky here. There's nothing wrong with that. You may also want to go take an actual legit course, like whatever flavor that you're trying to get better at. Go take a weekend practical rifle course or a weekend handgun course. Whatever you want to do. Go do an Appleseed shoot. And I have no affiliation with Appleseed, but if you're looking to be a decent rifleman and you want to go take the Appleseed course, it seems like a good way to go. So after you've done some self-improvement and you're looking for the next logical step, you may want to look at that. Anyway, those are some thoughts on how to maximize your potential at the range, how to improve your shooting ability. And it's a good question. That's a lot more important, I think, than debating the 760 by 39 versus the 5.56 or the 300 Win Mag versus the 300 Weatherby. Or not that stuff's not important. Obviously, I do a whole podcast talking about nerdy stuff like that. But this is the nitty gritty. This is where the rubber meets the road. So much so that when a patron asked me, I came home from the store to record this, even though I've already recorded today, and I'm going to put it out for the patrons right away. I think it's an important topic. I really do. That's going to bring us to the tactical tip of the day. Talking about range sessions, you probably don't need me to tell you to have a gun and have ammo. There are a few minor things you want to make sure, I think, that you have in your range bag. Well, I guess one have a range bag. But some things. Have a multi-tool. Doesn't even have to be a great one. Just a multi-tool with some basic tools on it that you might need when you're out at the range to bend a piece of wire. Your holster comes loose, you got to tighten the screw in it. Just basic stuff. Also have 2 ways, not one. Have 2 ways to attach your targets to the target stands. Whether that's tape and staples, or nails and tape, or tape and those big metal like folder clips that you get at office supply places, any of those. But I would have 2 in case one is not working that day, whatever. It's too windy, the tape won't hold, the staples are pulling out, you ran out of staples, at least you now have tape, right? That can be frustrating. And a Sharpie. If you are any kind of shooter, you need at least a Sharpie. Sharpie is part of my EDC, but if it's not, it definitely should be part of your range kit. Nothing is more frustrating trying to get a gun sighted in or trying to figure out how you're doing shooting, and you think you're going to remember that there was 4 holes over here, and then you get up there and you're like, is this from this time shooting? Is this from the last time shooting? Was this my first thing? Was this after I did the adjustment on the scope? I don't really remember. Now I'm frustrated. Bring a Sharpie. A little tactical tip inside a tactical tip with the Sharpie. If you're like doing groups and like shooting one iteration and then another, you can do clockwise around the bullet holes with a Sharpie. Like your first one can be at 12 o'clock. That's your first group. Your next group can be at 3 o'clock and then 6 and then 9. You get it? That's at least 4. Probably by then it's time to change targets, but if not, you can do circles or something else. You can color from 12 to 3 and then the next time from 3 to 6 on your next group. You get the idea. The little tactical tip inside a tactical tip there. Your tactical verse of the day. I already said it after the bio, but It's a good one for this one. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. It's God who gives you any skill, any talent, any breath in your lungs, any movement in your fingers. It's a gift from God. Remember that. It is God. It's all a gift from God. I enjoy those tactical verses. They're uplifting for me too, so I'm going to give you another. Forgive me if the reading is not flowing as well. My normal go-to is New King James. This is ESV. From Leviticus 26, you shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. 5 of you will chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 10,000, and your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. I will turn to you and make you fruitful, multiply you, and confirm my covenant with you. You shall eat old store, long kept, and you shall clear out the old to make way for the new. I will make my dwelling among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. And I will walk among you, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.